The massive screens in Times Square went dark all at once. People stopped walking and looked up at the unusual sight. Then every screen lit up with the same image: a fleet of ships near Jupiter, their metallic hulls gleaming in the distant sunlight. The crowd fell silent. This wasn't a movie trailer or an advertisement. This was real. Admiral Tom Baker stood at the window of the United Earth Defense Command, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. He watched as his staff rushed around the control room, their faces a mixture of fear and excitement. The massive ships had appeared just hours ago, emerging from what their scientists were calling fold space. Humanity had prepared for this moment for decades, but now that it was here, Baker felt a strange calmness. "Sir, they're broadcasting on all frequencies," Lieutenant Rogers reported, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "The message is being automatically translated." Baker nodded, turning to face the main screen. The image that appeared showed a tall, humanoid figure. Its skin had a slight bluish tinge, and its eyes were larger than human ones, but otherwise, it could have passed for human at a distance. "People of Earth," the figure spoke, its voice deep and clear. "I am High Commander Stone of the Imperial Galactic Confederation. Your species has been monitored since you first split the atom. We have decided it is time to make official contact." The control room remained silent. They had run this scenario in simulations hundreds of times. Now it was real. "We're picking up energy readings from their fleet, sir," Rogers whispered. "Their weapons could destroy Earth 10 times over." Baker kept his face neutral. They didn't know about Earth's hidden defenses, and he intended to keep it that way. "Open a channel," he ordered. "This is Admiral Baker of the United Earth Defense Command. We welcome peaceful contact with the Imperial Galactic Confederation." Stone's expression didn't change, but there was a slight shift in his posture that Baker caught. Surprise, perhaps, at how quickly humans had translated and responded to their message. "Your species has shown remarkable progress for primitives," Stone said. The words were diplomatic, but the tone was condescending. "We will establish an embassy on your planet. Prepare suitable accommodations." Baker felt his jaw tighten, but years of diplomatic training kept his voice pleasant. "We would be honored. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting to discuss the details." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The Empire, as everyone started calling it, set up their embassy in a newly constructed building in Geneva. Humans from every nation watched as alien ships became a common sight in their skies. News channels ran endless stories about humanity's new place in the galactic community. But Baker noticed things that didn't make the news. The way Imperial officials dismissed human technology, their barely hidden surprise when humans quickly learned to use their translation devices, the subtle tests they kept running, as if trying to determine humanity's true capabilities. During one meeting, Stone mentioned casually, "Most species we contact take years to grasp even basic Imperial technology. Your kind learns quickly, for primitives." Baker smiled, thinking of the quantum computers hidden in bunkers deep beneath the Earth's surface, the fleet of advanced ships concealed within the asteroid belt, the weapons that could match anything the Empire had shown them. "We do our best to learn," he said simply. 1 month after first contact, Baker stood in his private office, looking at a secure screen showing humanity's hidden preparations. 5 centuries of secret technological development, sparked by the discovery of ancient alien ruins on Mars. Hundreds of thousands of ships waiting in underground bases across the solar system. Energy shields that could withstand any known weapon. All of it hidden, waiting. "Keep watching them closely," he told his staff. "But remember, we show them only what they expect to see. Let them think we're primitive. Sometimes, being underestimated is the greatest advantage." As he watched another Imperial ship land at the Geneva embassy, Baker remembered an old saying: "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist." Humanity had learned that lesson well. They would play the role of the primitive species, learning and growing under Imperial guidance. And they would keep their true strength hidden, until they needed it. because Baker had read enough of the Empire's history to know that sooner or later they would need it. When that day came, humanity would be ready. 3 years after first contact, the colony ships lined up at Earth's orbital dock like giant silver arrows pointing to the stars. The Wilson family stood at the observation deck, 8-year-old James pressing his face against the thick glass as he watched the ships being loaded. "Will we really live on another planet, Dad?" James asked, his breath fogging the glass. His father, Robert Wilson, smiled and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. As the colony's chief engineer, he had helped design the life support systems that would keep them alive on their new home. "That's right. We're going to New Hope. It's the first human colony outside our solar system," Robert explained. His wife Mary, a botanist, was already aboard their assigned ship, setting up the hydroponic gardens that would help feed the colonists. The Empire had granted humans permission to colonize New Hope after months of negotiations. They called it a gesture of goodwill, though Admiral Baker had told Robert privately that it was more likely they wanted to keep humans contained and observable. The colony ship's interior buzzed with activity as 10,000 colonists settled into their quarters. James bounced around their small but efficient living space, touching everything and asking endless questions. The journey would take 3 weeks using the Empire's approved travel lanes. During the trip, James made friends with other children, including some from imperial families who were being sent to oversee the colony's development. The adult aliens kept their distance, but their children were more curious about humans. James taught them to play hide and seek in the ship's corridors, much to their fascination. New Hope lived up to its name when they finally arrived. Twin suns painted the sky in perpetual twilight, and the air had a sweet, clean smell. The ground was covered in purple-tinted grass that sparkled when the wind blew. Imperial constructors had already built the basic colony infrastructure, their machines having completed in weeks what would have taken humans months. "Remember," the Imperial overseer told them during their first briefing, "you are guests in this sector of space. The Empire's generosity comes with expectations of proper behavior and compliance with all regulations." The Wilson family was assigned a comfortable house near the colony center. Robert worked long hours helping to establish the colony's power grid, while Mary set up farming systems that combined Earth crops with local plants. James attended the colony's school, where human and imperial children studied together, a first in the Empire's history. As months passed, the colony flourished beyond imperial expectations. The humans adapted quickly to their new home, finding innovative solutions to problems that surprised their overseers. James became known throughout the colony as a bridge between the species. He had a gift for explaining human concepts to alien children and alien ideas to human ones. "The boy is unusually clever for a human child," one imperial official noted in a report. "He appears to grasp concepts that should be beyond his primitive neural development." One day, James and his alien friends discovered a cave network near the colony's border. The imperial children were nervous about entering. It was technically outside the approved settlement zone, but James convinced them it would be an adventure. Inside, they found walls covered in strange symbols that made the imperial children extremely quiet. "We should tell the adults," one of them said, but James had already started copying the symbols in his notebook. He didn't understand why his alien friends seemed so worried. That evening, Robert found James practicing drawing the symbols. He recognized them instantly. They were identical to the ones found in the Mars ruins, the discovery that had sparked humanity's secret technological leap. His hand shook as he told James to keep the notebook hidden and never show it to anyone. Life in the colony continued peacefully. On the surface, it was a perfect example of cooperation between humans and the Empire. But beneath that peaceful facade, tensions were building. Imperial patrols became more frequent. Regulations grew stricter. And in his hidden notebook, James kept drawing those ancient symbols, not knowing they would soon play a part in changing the galaxy forever. The Imperial overseer's reports grew more concerned. These humans adapt too quickly. They solve problems in ways we don't expect. Their children, especially, show disturbing signs of advanced cognitive development. Recommend increased surveillance and restricted access to Imperial technology. But it was too late. The humans of New Hope had already built something the Empire didn't expect. A community where their children played together, learned together, and broke down the barriers of species and empire. It was beautiful and fragile, and without knowing it, they were about to change everything. The alert sirens woke everyone in the colony at midnight. Red lights flashed across the purple fields as 3 Imperial warships descended from the sky, their engines glowing with an angry red light. James watched from his bedroom window as armored troops marched through the streets. "Get dressed quickly," Mary told James, her voice trembling as she packed a small bag. Robert was already on a call with other colony leaders, his face growing darker with each passing moment. "They're saying we violated restricted space," Robert told his wife. "But that's impossible. We've stayed within the approved zones." He looked at James, who clutched his hidden notebook tightly. "We need to get to the shelter." But they never made it. Imperial troops surrounded their house, their armor gleaming in the twin moonlight. High Commander Stone himself stepped out of a transport, his face twisted with anger. "We discovered unauthorized transmissions from this colony," Stone announced to the gathered crowds. "Hidden messages sent through encrypted channels. This is an act of espionage against the Empire." His eyes swept over the frightened colonists. "A routine inspection will now take place." The inspection was anything but routine. Imperial troops tore through homes, smashed equipment, and rounded up colonists into the central square. James watched as they pushed his father to the ground when he tried to protest. "The symbols," James whispered to his alien friend, a child named Blue after the color of his skin. "They're looking for the symbols we found." Blue's eyes widened with understanding and fear. In the confusion, James saw Imperial soldiers approaching a group of younger alien children who had hidden behind the school building. He recognized them. They were the ones he taught to play Earth games. They looked terrified. "Stop!" James shouted, running toward them. They didn't do anything wrong. He reached the alien children and stood in front of them, arms spread wide. The Imperial troops raised their weapons. "James, no." Robert's scream cut through the air as he broke free from his guards and ran toward his son. The energy blast was silent. There was just a flash of light, and then James fell. The alien children he tried to protect screamed, not in their usual musical language, but in raw, horrified terror that needed no translation. Time seemed to stop. Mary's wail of anguish echoed across the square. The alien children James had protected ran to him, their small hands trying to wake him up. Even some of the Imperial troops stepped back, shocked by what had happened. "A regrettable necessity," Stone said coldly. The boy was interfering with a lawful Imperial action, but his voice shook slightly as he watched the alien children weeping over the human child who had died protecting them. Blue broke away from his parents and ran to James's body. From James's pocket, he pulled out the notebook filled with the ancient symbols. Before any troops could stop him, he threw it into a nearby incinerator. The Empire would never know what James had found. Robert held his son's body, his tears falling onto James's still face. Mary collapsed beside them, her hands shaking as she brushed James's hair back one last time. Around them, both human and alien colonists watched in stunned silence. One of the Imperial troops, perhaps newer or younger than the others, stepped forward. "Sir," he said to Stone, "the boy was just protecting children. Our children." "Silence," Stone commanded. "The Empire's authority must be absolute. Let this be a lesson to all who would defy our rules." But he couldn't meet the eyes of his own people, who were backing away from him. As news of what happened spread through the colony, something changed. The alien children refused to leave James's side. Their parents, who had always kept a careful distance from humans, now stood with the Wilson family. In death, James had done what the Empire feared most. He had brought their peoples together. A young Imperial officer transmitted his resignation that night, along with a message to his command. Today, we didn't kill a primitive. We killed innocence itself, and I fear the humans will not forget. He was right. As James's body was prepared for burial according to Earth customs, modified to include alien rituals, a signal traveled faster than Imperial sensors could detect. It reached Earth in seconds, carrying 6 words that would change the galaxy. They killed a child. James Wilson. Respond. Admiral Baker was eating dinner when the message arrived. His fork clattered against the plate as he read the 6 words. Within minutes, every military leader on Earth received the same alert. The sleeper protocol was activated. Deep beneath the mountains of every continent, hidden facilities hummed to life. Inside the asteroid belt, mining stations transformed, revealing their true nature as warship factories. Military bases emerged from under the oceans, their cloaking shields dropping for the first time in centuries. Send the call, Baker ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of history. Every nation, every ship, every soldier. It's time. The response was immediate. China activated its lunar shipyards. Russia revealed its fleet hidden in the Kuiper Belt. The African alliance brought their orbital defense platforms online. Every country had played its part in the centuries-long deception, building and hiding humanity's true military might. In Geneva, the Imperial Embassy received thousands of messages, all carrying the same video. James Wilson standing in front of alien children, trying to protect them. The final frame showed his small body falling. The messages came from mothers, fathers, teachers, and children from every corner of Earth. They're jamming our communications, an Imperial officer reported frantically to High Commander Stone. No, wait. They're not jamming them. They're overwhelming them. Millions of humans are sending us the same images, the same message. The message was simple. Remember James Wilson. Baker stood in the United Earth Defense Command Center, watching as humanity's hidden fleet assembled. Each ship bore a name, not of generals or politicians, but of children who had died in humanity's long history of war and conflict. Now, joined by a new name, the James Wilson. Sir, Lieutenant Rogers called out, her voice filled with pride. The Wilson fleet is ready. The numbers scrolled across the main screen. 500,000 dreadnoughts, each more powerful than anything the Empire had ever shown them. Humanity had learned from the ruins on Mars, but they had improved upon that ancient technology, driven by the memory of every child lost to conflict. In orbit, Imperial ships watched in shock as humanity's fleet emerged. Their sensors couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. Warships rose from gas giant atmospheres where they had hidden for decades. Others appeared from dimensional pockets that Imperial science had thought impossible to create. Impossible, Stone whispered as he watched the feeds. They were primitives. We monitored them. We controlled their development. His hand shook as reports flooded in from across the solar system. The humans had never been primitives. They had found the ruins on Mars centuries ago, but instead of revealing their discovery, they had learned, planned, and built in secret. Every primitive step they had shown the Empire had been carefully calculated to hide their true progress. Baker addressed the world, his words broadcast in every language. For centuries, we prepared. We hid our strength because history taught us that great powers often fear those they cannot control. We played the role they expected, hoping peace would prevail. But they killed a child, not in war, not in battle, but for showing kindness to their own children. Across Earth, people gathered in streets and squares, watching as the Wilson fleet moved into position. Parents held their children close. In schools, teachers led their students in a moment of silence for James. Our response will not be genocide, Baker continued. We are not monsters. We will not punish children for the crimes of their leaders. The Wilson fleet carries a message. Never again will any child, human or alien, die because of Imperial arrogance. The fleet divided into battle groups, each taking position near major Imperial worlds. They didn't fire. They didn't need to. Their presence alone, the sheer scale of humanity's hidden power, sent a message that no words could match. In the New Hope colony, Robert and Mary Wilson watched the sky fill with Earth's ships. The alien children who had been James's friends stood with them, their hands joined in a gesture of unity that defied imperial divisions. "The Empire thought they were teaching us," Baker said in his final words to Earth, "but we taught ourselves the most important lesson. True strength lies not in domination, but in protecting those who cannot protect themselves." James Wilson taught us that lesson one final time. Now, we will teach it to the galaxy. The Imperial capital world fell silent as human ships filled their skies. The James Wilson, humanity's flagship, moved into position above the Imperial Palace, its massive hull blocking out the sun. Unlike Imperial ships with their sharp angles and weapon ports, the human vessels were smooth and sleek, almost beautiful in their deadly grace. Inside the James Wilson, Admiral Baker watched as Imperial ships scrambled to respond. Their weapons powered up, shields activated, but there was confusion in their movements. They had never seen technology like this before. "Play the message," Baker ordered. On every screen, billboard, and communication device across the Imperial capital, James Wilson's face appeared. Not his death, but his life. Videos of him teaching alien children to play human games. Images of him sharing his lunch with his alien friends. His smile, his kindness, his innocence. "We found the ruins on Mars 500 years ago." Baker's voice followed the images. "Your ancestors, the ones you call the precursors, left them there. But they left something else too. A warning about what power without wisdom could do to a civilization." The ship's sensors detected Imperial weapons powering up. Baker smiled sadly and pressed a button on his chair. Across the Imperial fleet, every weapon system quietly shut down. Engines went dark. Only life support remained active. "Your own history tells of the precursors' disappearance," Baker continued. "You thought they ascended to another plane of existence. The truth is simpler. They destroyed themselves. We found their last message, their final warning. Power is nothing without compassion." In the Imperial Palace, military leaders watched in horror as their most advanced systems were turned off by human technology they couldn't even detect. Humanity hadn't just matched precursor technology. They had surpassed it. "Your sensors can't detect how we do this," Baker explained, his voice gentle but firm. "We learned from the precursors' mistakes. They focused on weapons that could destroy. We focused on understanding the space between spaces, the gaps in reality where true power lies." The James Wilson's hull shimmered, becoming transparent. Inside, the Imperial citizens could see not weapons of war, but massive gardens. Laboratories, schools. This wasn't just a warship. It was a vessel of preservation and learning. "Each of our ships carries a piece of Earth with it," Baker said. "Libraries of human knowledge, seeds from every plant species, art, music, and most importantly, schools. Because that's what James Wilson died protecting. The right of children to learn, grow, and play together without fear." From the ships, small drones deployed. But they didn't fire weapons. Instead, they projected holograms, images of Earth's children in schools and playgrounds, learning alongside holograms of alien children. The technology to make this possible was centuries ahead of anything the Empire possessed. "We hid our progress because we saw in your history the same mistakes the precursors made, the same belief that power gives the right to rule. We hoped you would learn on your own. As we did, we waited, watched, and built in secret." The James Wilson's engines hummed with a sound that made Imperial scientists stare in wonder. They weren't using any known form of power. The ship's energy signature was unlike anything in their records. "This ship," Baker continued, "like all our ships, runs on what we call the Wilson drive. It draws power not from matter or antimatter, but from the bonds between all living things. The stronger those bonds, the more powerful the drive becomes. Your sensors can't detect it because you never thought to look for it. You were too focused on weapons of destruction to see the power of connection. In orbit around every Imperial world, human ships revealed their true nature. They weren't just warships. They were arcs, libraries, and schools. Each one named for a child lost to conflict, each one carrying the hope for a better future. "We could destroy your empire," Baker said quietly. "But that's not why we built this fleet. We built it to protect, to preserve, to teach. The question now is, are you ready to learn?" The Imperial citizens looked up at their skies filled with human ships, finally understanding. They hadn't been watching primitives develop. They had been watched by teachers waiting to see if they were ready for a greater lesson. A lesson that had cost a young boy named James Wilson his life to begin. High Commander Stone stood in the Imperial Palace's Great Hall, watching as transport ships landed in the courtyard. Not human warships this time, but smaller vessels carrying representatives from Earth. His hands trembled slightly as the doors opened. Admiral Baker walked in first, followed by Robert and Mary Wilson. The Imperial Council members stepped back involuntarily. These weren't the primitive humans they had looked down on for years. These were people who commanded power beyond Imperial understanding. "Your fleet has disabled our defenses across 17 sectors," Stone said, trying to keep his voice steady. "What are your demands?" "We don't make demands," Robert Wilson replied, his voice carrying the weight of his loss. "We offer a choice." The Great Hall's screens lit up, showing real-time images from across Imperial space. Human ships hovered near every major Imperial installation, but they weren't destroying anything. Instead, they were protecting Imperial worlds from their own military's desperate, scattered attempts to fight back. "Your empire is built on fear," Baker said, walking to the center of the hall. "Fear of the strong, fear of the different, fear of losing control. That fear led you to kill a child who only wanted to protect his friends." Mary Wilson stepped forward, holding something in her hands. It was James's favorite toy rocket, the one he used to play with before bed, dreaming of exploring space. She placed it gently on the grand table where Imperial wars had been planned for centuries. "Look at it," she told the Imperial Council. "This is what you feared, a child's dream of the stars." The palace shook slightly as another human ship arrived. This one was different, smaller, but somehow more impressive. Its hull was covered in drawings made by children from 1,000 worlds. As it landed, its ramp lowered to reveal not soldiers, but teachers, doctors, and scientists. "Your empire's military is disabled," Baker explained. "Not destroyed. Disabled. Each weapon has been turned off. Each warship engine is cold. We did this without firing a single shot, without taking a single life, because that's not who we are." The human ships began broadcasting again, but this time it was different. They showed Imperial children in their schools, learning about the glory of the Empire, being taught to fear and dominate. Then they showed human schools, where children learned about cooperation, exploration, and understanding. "Your children deserve better than to inherit an empire built on fear," Robert said. "James died protecting your children. We're here to continue his work." Stone's composure finally broke. "How?" he demanded. "How did you hide all this? Our best scientists, our deepest scans." "Because you looked for what you expected to see," Baker answered. "You looked for weapons, for armies, for things that could destroy. You never looked for gardens in our ships. You never scanned for schools in our stations. You never thought to check if our power came from understanding rather than destruction." Mary took out a small device and placed it next to James's toy rocket. It projected a hologram of New Hope Colony, showing Imperial and human children playing together. "This is what James created," she said softly. "This is what you destroyed. And this is what we're offering to rebuild." The human ships began to move, not to attack, but to form a protective ring around each Imperial world. From each ship, small pods descended, carrying seeds, books, and teaching materials. "Your empire can continue as it is, Baker said, ruling through fear until fear destroys you, just as it destroyed the precursors. Or you can choose another path. Let us teach your children what James knew, that friendship is stronger than fear, that understanding is more powerful than weapons. Stone looked at the toy rocket, then at the images of children playing together. For the first time, he saw what James had seen, the possibility of something better than an empire. The choice is yours, Robert said, his voice firm but not unkind. But know this, we will never again allow any child, human or imperial, to die because of fear. James was the last. Whatever you choose, that is not negotiable. The Imperial Council looked at each other, then at their disabled fleet, at the human ships protecting their worlds, at the teachers and scientists waiting to help. They saw their empire as it was, and as it could be. They saw what James Wilson had died trying to create, a future where children didn't need to be protected because they had never learned to fear each other in the first place. 5 years after the day Earth's fleet arrived at the Imperial capital, a new building stood on New Hope Colony. The James Wilson Memorial Academy spread across the purple fields where he once played, its walls covered in drawings made by children from 100 different worlds. Robert and Mary Wilson stood at the entrance, watching as human and alien children ran through the halls together. The school had become more than just a building. It was a symbol of what their son had died trying to protect. He would have loved this, Mary said softly, touching the nameplate by the door. Beneath James's name was a simple phrase. He taught us that friendship has no borders. Inside the classrooms, things that would have been impossible under the old empire happened every day. Human teachers worked alongside former imperial educators. Children learned about both Earth's history and imperial culture. Instead of learning about weapons and conquest, they studied ways to help worlds work together. The changes hadn't been easy. Some imperial leaders had resisted at first, clinging to their old ways. But it's hard to argue for fear when you see children playing together without it. The Wilson fleet remained in position around imperial worlds, but now they were welcome protectors rather than intimidating conquerors. Admiral Baker, older now but still standing straight, walked through the Academy's halls. He stopped at a window overlooking the playground where James had died. But now, instead of a place of tragedy, it was filled with laughter. Children from Earth played games with former Imperial children, teaching each other new ways to have fun. The Wilson Doctrine changed everything. Baker told a group of visiting teachers, every child, regardless of their world or species, has the right to grow up without fear. It sounds simple, but it took James's sacrifice to make us understand how important it was. The empire itself had transformed. The Imperial Council still existed, but now it included representatives from Earth and every other world. They called it the Galactic Federation now, and its first law was the Wilson Protocol. Any action that threatened children, directly or indirectly, was forbidden. High Commander Stone had retired years ago, but today he too visited the Academy. He walked slowly, aged by guilt and understanding. The children didn't fear him anymore. They didn't even know who he had been. To them, he was just another elder who came to tell stories and learn from their innocent wisdom. I was wrong, Stone told Baker as they watched the children play. We thought power came from making others fear us. These children have more power than our empire ever had, simply because they don't know they're supposed to be enemies. The James Wilson continued to orbit New Hope, but it had changed too. Its weapons systems had been converted into research labs. Its halls, once ready for war, now held libraries and classrooms. Every year, it took students from the Academy on educational voyages through space, teaching them about different worlds and cultures. In the Academy's central garden, a small toy rocket stood in a glass case. James's rocket. Around it, children from all species left their own toys, drawings, and letters. They wrote about their dreams, their friendships, and their hopes for the future. The letters were in different languages, but they all carried the same message. Thank you for teaching us that we don't have to be afraid of each other. Mary taught at the academy now, helping children learn about plants from different worlds. Robert used his engineering skills to build playgrounds where children of all species could play together safely. They still missed James every day, but they found comfort in continuing his work. The fleet was never about revenge. Baker told a young student who asked why Earth had built so many ships. It was about being strong enough to protect what matters. James showed us what matters: the ability to see friendship where others see differences. As the twin suns set over New Hope, casting their purple light across the Academy's grounds, the last children headed home. Some went to human homes, some to imperial ones, but they didn't see the difference anymore. They just saw friends. On James's memorial, new words had been added below his name. He didn't change the galaxy with power or fear. He changed it with a simple truth: that every child deserves the chance to make a friend. The Wilson fleet remained, watching over a galaxy that had learned its lesson. They were no longer hidden, no longer waiting. They were guardians now, protecting not just humanity's children, but all children. Because in the end, that's what James would have wanted: a galaxy where no child ever had to die for being kind.